Good morning. Today is October 8th, and this is History 202. And I just wanted to touch base on a few things. This is our second week back since the hurricane break. Things have been really wacky and up in the air, and I know that it probably is a little confusing coming back that first week. I do want to just point out a couple things. First is that the position paper was due today, due Sunday, yesterday. And the imperialism position is rather interesting. The original purpose of this was a 3-week activity where we'd have a small discussion amongst the people within the option. So, for example, option 1 was to take the Philippines and control them. Option 2 was to control the Philippines but focus on economic issues and let them have other freedoms. And option 3 was to just not be imperialistic at all. The original purpose was to let you talk in a small group with just those students. Then we'd have a full class discussion where you had a role play and you took the option and you role played whatever option it was. And then the third week would be to write this position paper where you could take whatever position you wanted, regardless of your role playing assignment. We had to condense that, so I did allow the imperialism choices full class discussion forum if there's people that wanted to talk there. Then you were to write the position papers. So I'm going to open this up for this week as well. If you didn't get the choices position paper done, I certainly understand that it's been kind of hectic. But please make sure you're considering that and thinking about that to complete the paper. And it looks like most people did. I have 14 submitted. You really just need to give me a 1 or 2 page explanation of which position you support and why. And you really should be using those documents that I gave you in order to support that position. I think that imperialism is often one of those overlooked moments in our history. It's that time period from post-Reconstruction 1880s to through the Roosevelt administration at the very least, so 1910s or so up until World War I, when the United States is growing and stretching and it's taking other countries over. And we can argue a little bit about westward expansion before the Civil War. We can talk about whether or not that is imperialism, because we are moving in and taking over Native American territories. We're taking over the Mexican area, the Mexican cession, right, which is the entire southwest corner of the United States. But when we're talking about imperialism, a lot of times we're talking about the United States taking over these small non-white island countries like Hawaii, the Philippines, Guam, Puerto Rico, and these have lasting impacts. I mean, we're still a protectorate of Puerto Rico, and the Puerto Ricans are American citizens, and yet they don't have all the same protections as somebody living in the mainland. And we can see that after what happened with, I believe it was Hurricane Maria last year. So the stuff that we're learning about with American imperialism still has long-term impacts on the peoples in those territories. Okay, the Dialectical Journal. If you have not yet done so, and you hopefully have done this, make sure that you have that blog set up and that you've given me the link to the blog. I haven't gone and looked at those recently. You should have 5 entries now. And I do want to point out that each one of these entries is for a particular chapter, and it kind of ties into the context. And I've tried to give you a link. The link might be a little off occasionally. But this is chapter 19, should be the 3rd entry. We started off with chapter 17 and 18, and now we're in 19. And when you go on to this American Yawp reader, you'll see that there are various sources here. So that's just the American Yawp. So I gave you the wrong link there. The primary source reader, and you can pick whatever chapter you want here. So this is the American Empire. And here they are. Here's the sources. So you can click on whatever document you want. And again, what I need to see is that you have taken 3 quotes from the source and you've reacted to them in some way. And if you need the instructions for that, that's it. Those instructions are back in the time period before we went on our hurricane break. So you should have 5 entries. You're going to add more entries this week. 2 more entries, so entries 6 and 7. We also have this Great Depression photo analysis that we need to that we're going to do. The Great Depression photo analysis. There's a file containing these 3 photographs. You're going to answer 4 questions for each photograph, and then you're going to try to answer these questions based on the photograph. And one of the things that we're trying to understand is that photos aren't necessarily 100% the story, right? We have that old saying, picture's worth 1,000 words, and that may be true, but there are certain situations where a photo can be, if not manipulated, then selecting a particular photo over another can tell a different story. So we're going to look at the story that these photographs are telling and why the government would choose to publish these particular stories. And then after you read about the Great Depression, consider what other messages could have been told about the Great Depression, what kind of pictures would be representative of that news story. So that would be your weekly assignment for this week. And we have a dialectal journal reflection paper. A couple of things about the reflection paper. First of all, here's a list of questions. You do not need to answer all of the questions. And in fact, I'd be surprised if you answered all of them. I'm looking for a page or so where you can reflect on the journal entries that you've put in so far. So from journal entry 1 through journal entry 6 or 7, what are some of the connections that they have? How do the sources connect to each other? How do they reflect the time periods that they're from? And how does that show change over time? I mean, we're starting off in the colonial era, now we're up to we're starting off in the post-Reconstruction era, now we're up to the 1920s. How has things changed, and how can you see that through the sources you've selected? Maybe consider how a historian would use the sources, how you are starting to understand the past. Maybe you're going to reflect on how society has changed over the sources that you've read. Maybe there's some generational changes that you're noticing between the sources, how women are treated, how minorities are treated, how power is being accumulated. Whatever the case may be, I want to see your reflections, not just a simple restatement of what's in the documents, but how the documents are interacting with each other and with your understanding of the time period. Okay, and the last thing is the discussion forum. The discussion forum is really important for what we do. And I need you to try to make your initial discussion post by Wednesday or so, because the idea is that you're going to put down your initial discussions and then you're going to respond to a couple of other people in the class. Without posting early in the week, say Wednesday or Thursday, there's not enough time for other people to post in response. So I'm going to start deducting points if you're not making that initial post early, and if you're not responding to other learners. So the idea is, again, trying to create some community, trying to get to have discussion. In this case, we're going to have a full discussion forum. You're going to be role-playing, and the way that this role-play is going to work, you're going to read through those sources that I have on the homepage. You're either going to be in support of option 1, which is supporting Lend-Lease and following through with getting the supplies. Maybe it's you're going to accept Lend-Lease, but you're not going to deliver the supplies to the West, or you're just going to stay right out of World War II and you're not going to want to deliver at all. This is content for next week, but the readings will give you an understanding of what your role is. And the way we're going to do the role is if you were born in January, February, March, or April, you're going to be taking option 1. If you're born in May, June, July, or August, you're going to take option 2. And if you're born in September, October, November, and December, you're taking option 3. Now, this is a role play just for this week. It is not going to be what you have to write your paper on. So next week, when we write the position paper, you'll be able to take any position you want. You can use the discussion forum as a way to understand what you want to talk about in next week's position paper. I'm sorry, there is one last thing I wanted to mention. This week is an exam week. Some of you have already taken exam 2 because I had forgotten to change the due date. So I had originally had it from October 1st through the 7th. I forgot to change the due date. So it was open all last week. It's going to be open this week as well. Those of you that took it last week scored really well. So I'm going to leave that open though for students to take this week. Please note that next week there's another exam based on this week's readings. So just be aware of that. And if you have any questions, I know things got a little wonky here. They'll even out after this week once we kind of get caught up from what we missed during the break. So again, as always, have a nice week. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks. Bye.